Sunday morning on BBC Radio Scotland.
Hello and welcome to Sunday Morning with me, Connie McLaughlin. How are you doing today? I'm going to be with you this morning until 10. I'm going to be chatting to the award-winning writer Damien Barr as he shares what it was like growing up gay in Thatcher's Britain and the role religion played in his upbringing as the son of a Catholic mum and a Protestant dad. And after 9, I'll be joined by a panel of guests, as we usually do on a Sunday, to look at some of the big events of the week, including no major surprises. We're going to be talking about Humza Yousaf's resignation and the crime drama that's been captivating audiences across the globe. Have you watched Baby Reindeer yet? And in a minute, I'm going to be chatting to a filmmaker who created a beautiful documentary as he cared for his elderly uncle in the final flamboyant years of his life. After this. Primal Scream. It is just coming up to 8:10 here on BBC Radio Scotland. I hope you're having a nice morning, whatever you're up to. Quite poignant music, actually, for what we're going to speak about next, because filmmaker Simon Chambers was living in New Delhi when his 85-year-old uncle David called him to say he thought he was dying. When Simon returned to London, he found David frail but in relatively good health, although isolated and feeling lonely. Much Ado About Dying is a beautiful, intimate film that follows Simon as he tries to care for David in his final years and all the challenges that you would imagine that throws up, from navigating the healthcare system to ensuring his uncle's vulnerability and compassion for other people weren't taken advantage of. Some of the moments are really tender, actually, between both of them. Here's a clip of both reflecting on David's life.
What did you mean when you said that you'd learnt more about life in the last few weeks than in the rest of your life put together?
But it's true. I feel it's true because earlier you were going through the middle of it, but you were too busy coping with the middle to actually see the whole. But looking back, you can understand how it all falls into place, especially when you're lucky like me. It doesn't all happen suddenly.
And filmmaker Simon Chambers joins me now. Welcome to the programme, Simon.
Hi, Connie. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for coming on. First of all, let me say I'm sorry for your loss. Watching the film was a difficult watch at times, but also inspiring, funny in moments. Tell me about David. Let's start there. And I guess from that point, why you decided to make this film in the first place.
Well, I had absolutely no intention of making a film whatsoever, but my uncle David was, as you said, a very flamboyant actor, and he was living on his own in a bit of a messy flat, and his life was all falling apart. And I've spoken to a lot of people who do family caring. Most of them are women, of course, and it's something that you never really want to do. And the filmmaking was the same, but because David was an actor, he kept saying to me, "What's your problem? You need to bring your camera along. You need to be filming me." And I thought, oh, nobody really wants to see a film about, an old man and me, another getting old man. And so I resisted it. But then when I did bring the camera along, it changed our relationship completely, because what I realized is an actor never really enjoys life more than when they're actually performing. They suddenly feel like they're alive. And when you speak to actors and they're not working, they can get quite depressed. So it changed our relationship and things were much more bubbly. And then again, I thought there's not really a film in this. I was doing all the caring. So it was 80% caring and it was 20% filming. And then I thought there's no drama here. But then suddenly, as you've seen the film, there's a moment when suddenly there's a lot of drama and then there's too much drama. And then I was going, please, no more drama. I can't bear it. And then in the end, it turned into a film where there's a lot happening.
I was saying actually to my producer Caitlin this morning, I could not stop watching it for the reasons that you were saying. I thought, right, okay, before I went into it, this would be quite a linear story of the end of someone's life, and in that you get so much, or you would get so much, but there's so much more to it, and the complexities of I guess someone who's vulnerable, and we're all so individual, and that really comes out. So dying is not necessarily the same for everyone, and David tried to do it, I guess, in his own terms. But tell us a little bit about, maybe for people who've not watched it yet, about some of those challenges. I'm thinking in particular about his neighbours and then the house burning down, and there's so much to talk about.
So, what I found out by touring the film around is that there's always some family carers in the audience, because I didn't realize it, but there are millions of us in the UK. And they always say, oh my God, you've kind of ticked all the boxes of all the issues around being a family carer. So, one of them was that I think the main thing is loneliness, and he was very lucky actually because he had these neighbors that used to pop around, but it wasn't clear really. He was very generous with them, and it wasn't clear really how much. I mean, it got to a point where I sort of stepped in and said, "Hey, listen, I think we need to sort of control the money a bit." I had power of attorney, which means you have control of the money.
Yeah, because at one point you realise that £25,000 has gone sort of walkabout. You're wondering where that's gone to, and you realise, is it Rodrigo, wasn't it? One of the neighbours had been having all these sort of life challenges, and David was very much willing to help. And the worry for you as someone looking on, thinking, I don't want him to be taken advantage of, but it's such a hard line to navigate, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's right. So other carers that have seen the film, they've said, when you're a carer, you've got no idea what's right and what's wrong. So David loved having these people around, and it really helped with him not getting lonely. And so you don't know when to step in, whether to sort of do something, because in a way they're having a great time, and it's wonderful that you're 85 and you have people coming around and helping out and talking to you and cracking open a bottle of wine. So that was one of the issues. Another one was a safety issue in the house, because everything, I don't know if you remember, but, there's these horrible heaters, and me and him keep bickering about them and I keep saying, you can't use them anymore. Look, you've got burn marks on your clothes. And he says, stop being a bossy nephew.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds a bit sort of serious and dire actually when we're talking about it, but it's actually incredibly funny because he's got such a kind of sparkly, bright, fizzy attitude to life, and I'm the serious, boring nephew, as he calls me, trying to keep it all in order, and so that creates a lot of bickering and a lot of tension between us. But he does all these hilarious things. He's got a big mouse infestation in his house. He thinks it's just one mouse that he sees as a bit of a friend. But, when you've got a mouse in your house, it usually means you've got 20 other mice, doesn't it? And so he used to put toothpaste all over for some reason on the electric sockets, because he thought that mice don't like peppermint. And so the toothpaste would sort of be a gentle reminder to the mice not to come into the kitchen.
And to be fair, I suppose, given the outcome, the fact that the house unfortunately went on fire, he then had to go to the temporary accommodation with his other neighbours, stroke carers, stroke friends. And then you found, it took a bit of convincing, but you found somewhere that you thought, I think it was you and your sister thought this would be perfect. It was a care home for retired actors. I'm not going to lie to you, Simon, I thought that place looked great. So much going on.
I know, it's fabulous. I mean, the other thing, you see, it got too much for me. I couldn't cope anymore, and my sisters thought, you're having a nervous breakdown, Simon. You need to put David in a care home. And David, like a lot of people, said, over my dead body, am I going to go into a care home? And then what was interesting was he went to this actor's care home, and we pretty much had to sort of kidnap him and put him in the back of an ambulance. Yeah. And then when he got there, he said, oh my gosh, it's marvelous here. Look, you press this button and somebody comes. And, he absolutely found it fabulous. And of course, he had all these other retired actors there. Lots of them had dementia. And they'd sort of pop by every day and say, oh, didn't I see you in 1982 in Hamlet at the National and all of that sort of thing. So they absolutely loved it. And then because quite a few of the men were gay as well. And so they'd sort of talk about all the carers and go, wow, isn't he beautiful, this one? And I like that one, and blah, blah, blah. And it was a bit like those two, the two old men that sit in the balcony in the Muppets and talk to him. Him and his friend are like that. About all the things in the care home. So in the end, what was interesting is that what he didn't want to do was actually the best thing for him. And I think we all fear the care home, because the only time we ever hear about care homes is when they've done something terrible. That's when they're in the news. But actually, lots of care homes are absolutely fabulous.
And that was apparent, and particularly, I guess, because, as you say, whenever you first came back over from New Delhi and you were helping with the caring process, he was in relatively good health, but then things started to deteriorate. That clip that we heard at the start was I think, one moment in the film that really got me thinking about, I guess, not just about what dying tells us about dying, but what dying tells us about life.
That's right. I mean, David used to say to me that life has no meaning without death. It's just a sort of shaggy dog story that would go on and on and on and on if we didn't die. And so it's the death that gives us the meaning. But the thing is, we've got this sort of fear of death, and we don't want to talk about it. And that's one of the great things about this film, is it's got people talking, because David wants to have a good death. It's almost like his grand finale as an actor.
Yeah.
And he wants to make sure that it's how he wants it. And I'm trying to help him to have that. And actually, I mean, at the end of the film, lots of people are all a bit teary when the lights come up in the cinema. And I've said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I hope you're not sad." And people say, "Oh, no, it's not sadness. It's actually because it was so beautiful that somebody took it into their own hands how they want to die and made it happen, and had this sort of attitude which was positive about death." And I think we need to change the way we do look at death, because we're all frightened of it and we don't know about what's going to happen and all of that. But we need to talk about it. It's the sort of big taboo at the moment.
Yeah. Well, listen, Simon, thank you so much to both you and David for showing us that it's such an intimate part of both of your lives. And you can have a look, actually. Much Ado About Dying is showing across Scotland at various venues, including in Skye tonight, actually, at the Community Cinema, and Glasgow Film Theatre tomorrow, where Simon's going to be doing a Q&A, actually, about the film. And any more details you want to know about screening, you can go on to muchadoaboutdying.com. Thank you for that, Simon. All the best with it.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
See you later, Simon Chambers there. It is definitely worth having a watch. It was one of those ones, I watched it last night and I couldn't stop. And at the end of it, I just sat for a minute. I'm thinking, goodness me, there's just a lot of sort of poignancy around it. We don't talk about death an awful lot, do we? Right. In just a couple of minutes' time, we're going to be hearing about the Warblers, a singing group made up of folk with lung conditions, or those who struggle a bit with breathlessness, maybe. And award-winning writer Damien Barr will be sharing what it was like growing up with both Protestant and Catholic parents on today's This Spiritual Life. But first, let's get some music for you. The gorgeous Diane Warwick. Here she is with What the World Needs Now.
What the world needs now is love. Sweet love, it's the only thing that there's just too little of. But what the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. Lord, we don't need another mountain. There are mountains and hillsides enough to climb. There are oceans and rivers enough to cross, enough to last till the end of time. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. Lord, we don't need another meadow. There are cornfields and wheat fields enough to grow. There are sunbeams and moonbeams enough to shine. Oh, listen, Lord, if you want to know. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's
Dionne Warwick there with What the World Needs Now. Right, it is 25 minutes after 8. Communal singing, right, is a thing that many people take part in, especially maybe on a Sunday. It's part of our religious worship, maybe. But a group in Midlothian have come together in a church every week for the last while to join together in song for another reason. The Warblers are a singing group comprising members who all have one thing in common. They sing as a form of therapy, and not just any therapy for the lungs. Members of the group, which also has a branch in Musselburgh, include people with conditions like asthma, bronchial issues, the effects of long COVID and COPD. Paul English went along to rehearsals at St John's and King's Park Church in Dalkeith to find out more.
James, hello there.
Nice to see you. We're singing in Japanese.
Okay, I arrive at an interesting time.
My name is James Robertson, and I'm one of the song leaders of the Warblers. My own professional background is in music therapy, and I've also always enjoyed working with choirs. And when I became aware of Singing for Lung Health, it seemed to bring together those two interests in my life. While there are many ways in which people with breathing difficulties can be helped and assisted, we find that singing has a unique role to play. It's something which people love doing. They can be sharing it with other people simultaneously. And without even perhaps thinking about it, their health is improving in the moment as they are singing and thinking about their breathing. They do that quite naturally when they're singing. So it has a physical benefit, it has a social benefit. Sometimes people with breathing difficulties can be a little isolated. And when we meet on a Tuesday, it's great that we all come together and just enjoy the moment of singing songs that we love.
I think we should sing it the whole way through. And again, when we get to the very, very, very last time, just have a bit more of a slow down. You got to have a dream. If you don't have a dream, how you gonna have a dream come true?
My name's Julie Surgeon, and I'm a member of the Warblers Choir in Dalkeith. I was diagnosed with COPD and asthma a couple of years ago, and I took it really, really bad. Kind of hid away, even though I do work. I did nothing for myself because I thought I was embarrassed about having a lung condition. And then I heard about the Warblers, and I thought I'm going to give it a wee bash. And I came along, and I absolutely love it. It's the one thing that I do for me, and I would say it's my therapy for my COPD. I've got breathing exercises that I can do with the others. People look at lung disease and think it doesn't happen to them, but it happens to everybody, even young people. And I think that's what my problem was. I found it hard being young and having this disease. But you know what? Singing makes me happy. And this group is just amazing. There's no judgment in this group whatsoever. Even if there was a miraculous cure and I found that my lung disease was cured, I'd still want to come at the Warblers because
that's about the best thing you could say about it, really, I suppose, isn't it? How do you find singing helps your condition?
Well, singing helps me hit notes that I probably wouldn't hit on a normal talking level. It actually makes me want to think about my breathing as well, so I'm getting that aspect. And it just, when you feel good, you actually feel better about yourself. And it's just a ripple effect, because when I feel better, my whole world's just happy. And that helps the people that I live with as well. So, yeah, it's a great ripple effect. And I love singing, all sorts.
So tell me a little bit about the Warblers' repertoire.
So we sing Scottish songs. We've sung modern songs. I can hold my own at parties now and sing all these songs. So, I know.
You get up at the end of the night, do you?
I'd probably be told to sit down, but I would give it a bash anyway. So, do you know, I think it's really funny because all my life my kids, they've always says to me, please mum, don't sing. But do you know, in here I'm encouraged to sing. It's just a great feeling that I'm amongst like-minded people.
And all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well.
My name's Shirley Sweeney and I'm a member of the Warblers Club. And when I first started the Warblers, there was only myself and 2 people from Musselburgh, just to get started off. The thing for me was the breathing exercises that you get. I also have bronchiectasis. And what I like about it just now with James, he'll start singing a song and you've only got the breath to go halfway through the first line. By the time James is finished with you, you can sing the whole line to the end. He gives you these breathing exercises so that you follow when you're breathing out, and you'll push and keep going with his hand, showing you with his hand.
Learning how to fly, making all the music you can make.
And if, again, thinking about our breathing and that extending the phrase, so talk about a moon floating in the sky. And that last note, bring that out. Make. Nice and loud.
What is it about the physical act of singing that helps to improve the condition of people who are dealing with lung issues?
When we sing, we often think about our posture, how we're standing or sitting, and how we want to improve our posture for the actual process of singing. It helps us with our projection in wanting to communicate words more clearly with our diction and articulation. It helps us sustain our breathing much more, particularly with the out-breath, and thinking how that can be held for a little bit longer. So the physicality of the breathing, the posture, the articulation, as well as enjoying being with others is so important.
We'll give you a reintroduction.
You a singer before you joined the choir?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I'm not a singer at all. I wouldn't call it a choir either. I would call it a singing group, because you don't have to be a good singer to be here. I'm on oxygen 24/7. So for me to be able to go out the door this afternoon and just go, and I can fill my lungs, where I didn't feel that before I came in. Good company, friendship with everyone, having a good chat. Wee cup of tea at the break and a blether and a biscuit. It's just a nice place to be.
You got to have a dream. If you don't have a dream, how you gonna have a dream come true?
Right, I would give that 11 out of 10, and I think we all deserve a cup of tea. Would you agree?
Yes.
Tell you what, cup of tea, biscuit, bit of singing. What is not to love about that? Paul English there with that report featuring the voices of the Warblers, who, by the way, will be taking part in the Breath of Life concert in aid of singing for lung health at St Serph's Church in Inverleith tonight at 6:30. As I speak, Damien Barr, the award-winning writer behind the modern Scottish classic Maggie and Me, settling into our Glasgow studio. Give us a wave, Damien. Yeah, it really doesn't work massively for radio, but I can assure you, I can see him. He's there. He's standing by. Before I talk to him, let's get you a little bit more music. Your telephone on BBC Radio Scotland.
Now you young folks is raving about how bad you want to be free. But I want to tell you what it was like in my day for an old man like me. Are you ready for this? Now you listen. take it on, little brother, and make a way. I said, take it on, little brother, take it further. Yeah. Now I had to work every day on my job, but didn't get much pay. Had to say I said to the other man, I was too confused to understand. Had to do things, yeah, against my will. If I had no little brother, you wouldn't have lived. Take it on, little brother, take it farther. I said, take it on, little brother, and make a way. Now you got the future in your hand. Now don't you be no lazy man. We laid the ground, made the way for you. Come on and show us that you're proud of us. You'll have it hard, try to get through, but keep on pushing. We're right behind you. Take it on, little brother, take it further. I said, take it on, little brother, and make a way. I said, take it on, little brother, take it further. Take it on, little brother, and make a way.
Guest this week in My Spiritual Life will likely be a familiar face and voice to you if you're a big book lover. His life has been about writing, telling and celebrating stories. He's the host of BBC Scotland's Big Scottish Book Club and the author of the novels You Will Be Safe Here and memoir Maggie and Me, with the adaptation of the latter actually coming to the stage. Damien Barr has now turned his hand to playwriting as well. The National Theatre of Scotland's version of Maggie and Me will be hitting theatres throughout the country in May and June, actually. And he joins me now. What a build-up you've had, by the way.
Oh, it's been so exciting. I'm so terrified and nervous and grateful. All of the things.
Good. Right. Well, it's brilliant. I love this part of the show, right, because we get a good bit of time to sort of breathe and just go into a little bit more about your life and everything else. So you're with us right up until 9 o'clock. So will we start at the beginning in terms of Maggie and Me, right? We've got loads to talk about. But given the fact you're making this sort of transition to the stage with this, it came out, first of all, a decade or so ago. But for maybe people who've not read it yet, set the scene or maybe the stage a little bit for us with it.
Well, it's about me growing up in Lanarkshire in the 1980s and 1990s. So I grew up in Urt Hill, which is just outside Motherwell. And places like the Grotto, which is still there down the back road to Carfin. Places like Ravenscraig, not there anymore, as it was when I was a wee boy, when it was this kind of gigantic machine city. The Bing, which is this, huge towering slag heap with ponds and trees and all sorts growing in it. So it's about a place that has been partly erased, but that I still remember, and it's about a time that I lived through. And of course, the Maggie in the title is Maggie Thatcher, who was very, very present in my life and whose policies really directly affected my life, like the closing of the steelworks. But it's also, the Maggie's also my granny, who's dead now. So it means even more, actually, that I can sort of look at the title of that book and think about my granny Mac. So it's about coming of age. It's about coming out. After my parents divorced, things were very hard at home. They both chose partners that I wish they hadn't. And it's about that process, really, of surviving what a lot of people say, you shouldn't talk about what happens at home. And the way that I survived that was through friends, it was through stories, it was through books.
It's funny, right? Because as a Lanarkshire lass myself.
Oh, right. Where are you from?
So I'm originally, I was born in Bellshill, but brought up
Same.
in, yes, the place to be, Bellshill Maternity. I went to school there and I grew up in Uddingston. So, but Carfin Grotto, my whole family were from that area. They were sort of from Carfin. And I think about when I was reading some of the stuff that you've done, and it transported me right back to there.
Good.
And there's something about that, I guess, the sort of normality of a place like that, the down-to-earth nature of a place like that, which could be replicated all across Scotland in some way, shape or form in different towns with a different name. But what was it about, I'm thinking about the grotto in particular, that gave you sanctuary in some way?
Sanctuary is such an important word, isn't it? It's a very old word, and it's a word that we need to really understand. What is sanctuary? It's a place that's free of judgment. It's a place where you're free of harm or the threat of harm. And as a wee boy, I would sneak there when we lived at the flats at Carfin. It was where we moved when my mum left my dad and moved in with this other partner, and he was very, very, very anti-Catholic. And so I knew he'd never go to the grotto. I knew he'd never set foot in it. And so I knew that I would be safe there. And I found, to me, the grotto was like Narnia when I was a kid. It really was. It was the statues. I remember going and sitting at the feet of the statues and looking up at them and thinking that if I talked to them long enough or I prayed to them long enough, that they would somehow come to life. You know, like the statues in The Clash of the Titans, that film that I loved watching when I was a wee boy. And I used to sneak behind the statues if people came in that, you know, and I didn't want to be seen there, or the canon, who we were always a wee bit scared of, was going around. I would hide behind the statues. And it's a place that I knew. A place that I knew very, 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 very well. I mean, it's changed over the years as the community's changed, and that's right that it should. But the essence of it remains the same. It's always, for me, going to be a slightly magical, slightly kitsch, beautiful place. And I've taken people there who've read about it in the book, and then they go there and they just kind of go, I can't believe a place like this exists, because it's calm, and it's restful, and there is something inspiring about it.
When there was such a juxtaposition between that sanctuary that you're talking about and the other areas of your life that you've described, and especially from a sort of faith perspective, growing up with your dad being Protestant, your mum being Catholic, and I guess, what did that do for your own identity? Because you didn't go, you went to a non-denominational school, didn't you?
I did. I mean, you know, I thought that Catholic and Protestant were two separate religions when I was growing up. Really, I did think that they were really two very separate religions. And my neighbours and my pals were Catholic. The Catholic side of my family is bigger, so there's more cousins, so there's more fun and all the rest of it. But I felt very divided, a sort of internal schism, if you like. My dad wasn't religious at all in the way that my mum is. And so she would talk to me a lot. She still has a very strong faith. And she would tell me stories from the Bible. But at school, you know, even though I went to non-denominational school, I do remember still getting the very brightly coloured Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, and be taken up to the Church of Scotland, which in Newthill is right across the road from the chapel. Talk about architecture. And so I would go to them both. I would go to them both. And I remember sitting with my mum when she was talking to the priest. We're sitting in confession and, you know, picking away at the wood chip wallpaper. And obviously that's something I've since asked forgiveness for.
Yes.
But very bad. But so it did give me this sort of sense of a kind of a schism inside myself. And it was hard growing up like that because, you know, there's an incident that I write about in the book which also has made it to the play, where, you know, I can't say the words that were said on the radio, but the chants were made, chants of words from opposing sides of the religious divide were made, and I, without knowing what I was saying, said something that ended up getting me absolutely battered by some so-called pals, put in a wardrobe and chucked off the top of the Bing. So, you know, sort of sectarian violence was a part of my life in a way that it's quite hard to explain to people if they didn't grow up. I mean, you know, because you grew up in that in that
Yeah.
place at that time.
It's kind of normalised, wasn't it?
It's so ingrained. It's just like the rain. Do you know what I mean? It's there every single day. And there are lines in the play, like there's a line where one of my friends says, you know, so what? So your friend was Catholic and you weren't. Does that matter? And I was like, it mattered. You know, it absolutely mattered. And I suppose the question is, does it still? But it's important to, I think, capture the attitudes of that place and time.
And there's a great question. Does it still matter now? Because I guess this is part of what you're... I'm assuming it's part of what you're trying to do telling this story, is identify if it is, and I think about, I guess, where we want that the relevance of that to go, maybe, in some way.
Well, I mean, you know, it's an interesting question. I went back to my old school the other day, and, you know, Brannock High School, just down the road from Taylor High School, or up the road, depending on your perspective, which is a Catholic school. And of course, you know, that was like a sort of battle royale all the time.
Oh, yes.
Is it still? That's the question. I don't go to that school anymore, and I wonder. I mean, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be the issue ever that it ever was, but it was in my home. You know, it was in my home. I felt that division in my home. I think one of the few things that I felt that Catholics and Protestants could agree on, at least when I was a boy, was this: that when I started to realise that I was gay, and bear in mind I had quite a strong faith, that was terrifying to me, because both sides said this is wrong. Both sides said, you know, you're going to hell. You need to change. And actually, it was very interesting that when I told my granny Maggie, who I mentioned at the start there, who was so Catholic, you know, it was not even true. She said that you're the way God made you. You know, you're the way God made you. And she was somebody I was terrified of telling, because I thought, you know, she'd be like, right in the "you're going to hell" brigade, but she wasn't. And that really surprised me. It taught me not, I think, to jump to conclusions about people in that way. But also, you know, she was really clear. God made you the way you are, and that helped me at that time to hear that.
You know, it's funny, last week we were talking about religious education in schools and how that impacts people, and all the bigger questions that sometimes comes around that. So it's interesting that we're reflecting on that again today. Damien, we've got so much to discuss still, right? Because you've had such a sort of colourful life and loads of things that you've done. We asked you to choose a bit of music, and reading into the some of the amazing people that you've met and spoken to, was the person that you've chosen for your song one of the highlights?
Oh my God. Absolutely. Meeting Dolly Parton, interviewing Dolly Parton was one of the highlights of my life. She's an incredibly clever and generous and kind lady. So I'm looking forward to hearing from her this morning.
Right. The track that you've gone for is Coat of Many Colours, and here she is, Dolly Parton.
Back through the years I go wandering once again, back to the seasons of my youth. I recall a box of rags that someone gave us, and how my mama put the rags to use. There were rags of many colors, but every piece was small, and I didn't have a coat, and it was away down in the fall. Mama sewed the rags together, so in every piece with love she made my coat of many colors that I was so proud of. As she sewed, she told a story from the Bible she had read about a coat of many colors Joseph wore, and then she said, perhaps this coat will bring you good luck and happiness. And I just couldn't wait to wear it, and Mama blessed it with a kiss. My coat of many colors that my mama made for me, made only from rags, but I wore it so proudly. Although we had no money, well, I was rich as I could be, in my coat of many colors my mama made for me. So with patches on my breeches and holes in both my shoes. In my coat of many colors, I hurried off to school just to find the others laughing and making fun of me. In my coat of many colors, my mama made for me. And oh, I couldn't understand it, for I felt I was rich. And I told them all the love my mama sewed in every stitch. And I told them all the story mama told me while she sewed, and how my coat of many colors was worth more than all their clothes. But they didn't understand it, and I tried to make them see that one is only poor only if they choose to be. Now I know we had no money, but I was rich as I could be. In my coat of many colors, my mama made for me, made just for me.
Coat of Many Colours by Dolly Parton. Chosen by my guest this morning, the author, playwright and broadcaster Damien Barr. Just one line in that song there actually got me thinking, Damien, about what makes you feel rich. This idea, she was just saying actually, well, it's not about money for me, it's about this thing in life that makes, her feel how she feels about herself. What is the thing that makes you feel rich?
Love. I have a lot of love in my life, and I feel very lucky to have it. I was always, however much my parents got wrong, and nobody beats themselves up more about that than they do. I always felt very loved. But, my mum sort of put this cloak of love. I always remember the adverts from when I was wee of the Ready Brek boy.
Oh, yeah.
And he eats the Ready Brek and it goes all red. There's like a force field. And I have that, and I've always had that. And in the love in my life now, I'm lucky. I met my partner Mike when I was at university. He's my husband now. But when we got married, which is something we couldn't do for the longest time, it was not something that I ever planned. I'm always amazed by people who are like, "Oh, I was planning my wedding when I was wee," and it's like, well, you could, because that was a right that you had, but I didn't have it, and so it was not something I thought would ever happen. And when it did, I wanted all the people there who I loved and who loved me. And it was my family, my, what Armistead Maupin calls my biological family and logical family. So the people I've chosen and who choose me, who are just as important to me as my family. But also, there were people there. My teachers were there from school, because, who would you want controlling a rowdy crowd better than some teachers from a school in Lanarkshire? They kept everybody in their place, and so there was loads of love there, and I think about that day often. So yeah, love is that how cheesy is that as an answer? But it's true.
I know,
it's true.
One of my favourite phrases is that cliches are always cliches for a reason, aren't they? Because they're usually true. You are, I think, calling you an all-rounder's fair.
Fair enough, I'll take that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Writing books, broadcasting on the TV and radio, and now obviously the play as well. What does it give you? What is this part of your life, and how you get to express yourself and be creative? What does that give you?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be me without it. I think if I had to, if there was only one thing that I would do with my whole life, it would be writing. That is, first and foremost, who I am, what I am. My mum taught me to read and write with a word tin when I was very little, and the word tin has made it into the play. And so stories have always been a part of my life. And for me, it's a way to I think it's a way to work out how I feel about myself and how I feel about the world. And that's true whether it's fiction or non-fiction. When I wrote You Will Be Safe Here, which is set in South Africa, people were like, oh, that's really different from Maggie and Me, which is, set in Motherwell and Newt Hill. And it's a different place, but I'm exploring the same themes: mothers and sons, abuse and survival, oppression and resistance. These are the things that I think I experienced as a child, as a wee boy, and that I'm still interested in as a man. So I couldn't live without telling stories. And also, one of the really special things is that people will share their stories with you too. So it's an exchange. And I think what I've realised about the theatre, and I should say, I have a co-writer on this play as well called James Lay, and a brilliant director, Shubha Das, and a whole team of people from the National Theatre of Scotland. So I'm not alone You know, I'm not. When you write a book, it's much more lonely. Writing a play is much more social and much more connected. You're not on your own. And that, I think, is part of what people are going to experience when they come to see the play. Because I think fundamentally that's what stories do, right? They comfort us. They give us somebody invisible with us on the way, which is something who have people who have faith will understand that. People who don't have faith understand that too, but they have different characters. And so for me, that's what stories are. They're connection. It's a way of making myself understood in the world and a way of understanding myself. You know, the play is not just the book plonked on the stage. The play is looking at two DBs. It's the wee boy, but it's also the young man who was writing that book. And so,
are they still the same person?
No, they're not. They're not. It was really interesting and obvious to me to see that. They are.
But I guess one maybe can't be the other without the other.
Exactly, right? They're sort of like those Russian dolls, I guess.
Yeah.
It is so weird for me to meet to be with the actors, the brilliant actors who are playing the different versions of me on stage, and that will just never not be surreal. You know, it just is weird.
Did you ever think about doing it yourself?
Well, acting in it. Somebody did ask me that actually, and I was like, honestly, I think we've got enough me. I think we've got enough me.
Quite enough now.
We've got enough me, but it is. I think I don't know. I don't think you'd say you were the same person that you were when you were 5. I think you answer some questions as you grow up, and then you're left with others. New questions come in, and maybe you stop growing when you stop asking those questions. But I think when I finished the memoir, I would have said, right, I sort of feel like I understand myself, and 10 or so years later, I've revisited that, and I realised I still had lots of questions. And theatre is very good for that. Theatre is very good as a place to help you ask questions. This is my first stage play, but I'd done radio plays before, and I've always loved the theatre. And that's one of the things that I like about it is its reluctance to provide easy answers or even to ask easy questions.
Which is part of why I love this job as well. Sometimes it's great to meet people who have equally as many questions as I do. It's always a bonus.
Nosy is another word for it, Connie. Nosy is another word.
Or curious, as I'm trying to... people
is that how you're rebranding it?
Well, people I've got a 1-year-old, right, and people keep saying, oh, he's the nosiest child I've ever seen. I'm like, no,
he's curious.
As he's trying to break his neck to see who's around the corner. Do you know, it's funny what you're saying there about that part of you that's sort of like there's a strand, I guess, of you that comes with you, that grows with you. My gran used to say that the voice in your head from when you're a young child or you're a sort of in midlife and when you're older, the voice is the same voice that goes through. It's just, I guess, that it's, it learns different things and it hears different things. I always think that's quite an interesting, it's like the part of the self that comes with you and is taken forward. For you then, for this, and just wrapping up because we're heading towards the news, but if people are coming to see this and you want them to sit there, I guess, enjoy it, what do you want them to think and feel and take away? What would be a win for you?
That's a really good question, and it's a really nice one, thank you. I feel like I was told so often as a wee boy that nobody would believe me, and that I shouldn't tell my story. I should be quiet about things. And when I realised I was gay, it was very much something that should be kept secret and to be ashamed of. And I don't feel that way now. But it's taken me a long time to get to that place. And what I want is for people coming to see the play, whoever they are, whatever their background is, I believe that everybody has a story, right? I really do believe that everybody has a story and that stories are for everybody. And the play is about the process of me trying to find my voice to tell that story, which was really hard, right? It was not easy. It was really to deprogram myself and to sort of take, to actually really hear that voice that you were talking about, right? Not the insults, not the names I've been called, not the fears, not the homophobia, not all of that, but actually just to hear that wee boy's voice again. That was really hard to reconnect with him. And I'm holding his hand right now. And what I want is for everybody who comes to see the play, wherever they come and see it, is for them to reconnect with that voice inside themselves, to believe that their story matters and to take that out into the world, not just the belief in their own story, but to understand that everybody they meet has a story and to try and make time in their lives to share that.
Okay. Damien, thank you so much. A lovely way to end. Good luck with it all. We'll speak to you soon.
All right, thanks for having me.
Davy Barr is touring right across, taking his tour right across the National Theatre of Scotland. It's Maggie and Me. The news is next. It's Sunday morning with me, Connie McLaughlin. It's 9:05. How you doing? In this hour, I'm going to be joined by three brilliant brains. Right, you've got to stick around for this. We've got Talat Yaqub, a social researcher and equalities campaigner, Laura Young, who's a Christian environmental campaigner, and Graham Burgess, who is a journalist and writer and member of the Baha'i faith. We're going to be delving into some of the faith and ethical themes in the news this week, including, no major surprises, we're going to be talking about Hamza Yusuf's resignation as First Minister, and then the subsequent discussion about leadership and multiculturalism and how that all works together. Plus, we're going to be looking at Baby Reindeer, which is based on a real-life stalking story. And if you've been one of the millions of people watching, you might be familiar with this little number.
that's the truth, honey. To love me like a you do. Oh, yeah. No, I ain't never found me a girl to love me like you do. Oh no, to love me like you do. That's the truth, to love me like you do. Oh no, no, I ain't never found me a girl like you do.
I don't know if you've watched this yet. It is, yeah. I'm not really sure how, to describe it accurately, but we're going to delve into that a little bit later before 10 o'clock. But first, on Friday, former Deputy First Minister John Swinney announced his bid to stand as First Minister of Scotland. So we're going to be looking into that and thinking about the leadership more generally. I'm going to do that this morning in the company of Talat Yaqub, a social researcher and equalities campaigner. Morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for coming in. We've also got Laura Young, who's a Christian environmental campaigner. Morning, Laura.
Good morning.
Good to speak to you. And also alongside me is Graham Burgess, who's a journalist and a writer and member of the Baha'i faith. Morning.
Morning, Connie.
I don't even want to go there too soon about baby reindeer, right? So we will delve into that. But it has been a big week in Scottish politics. It's been a big week for, I guess, the electorate more broadly. So I was mentioning John Swinney there. We know that following Kate Forbes' decision not to stand, he looks set to be the party's sole candidate. So this, of course, followed by the resignation of Humza Yousaf, who announced on Monday he's going to be standing down. It was a revealing and heartfelt speech that prompted various thoughts on the nature of leadership, particularly in 21st century Scotland. So let's start by hearing a little bit from the speech that Humza Yousaf made.
To be able to govern effectively and efficiently, trust when working with the opposition is clearly fundamental. And while a route through this week's motion of no confidence was absolutely possible, I am not willing to trade my values and principles or do deals with whomever simply for retaining power. Therefore, after spending the weekend reflecting on what is best for my party, for the government and for the country I lead, I've concluded that repairing our relationship across the political divide can only be done with someone else at the helm.
Right. Let's start. I think in this instance, a good place to begin this discussion is, what do we mean, Graham, by a good leader, first of all? And we can pick back the way.
I mean, I think that's crucially important. I mean, on a personal level, I felt he handled the resignation with dignity. Obviously, a mistake had been made. But I think in terms of leadership, really, I've been thinking a lot about this week in terms of what do we mean by a leader and who are to be led.
Yeah.
Because he talked there about party, government and country. Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes, so I think there was no vote of thanks. I think when we think about people, leaders are human beings. They often go into politics as activists or because they believe in something, they want to be of service. And I think sometimes we have this idea of a leader as someone who we vote every few years, we hand over responsibility to leaders. But actually a leader can also be someone to inspire us to all work together in terms of building a better society. And I think sometimes that huge responsibility that leaders have on perhaps isn't recognised in a human level. But I looked I don't want to sound like a poor imitation of Susie Dent on Countdown, but I looked into the etymology of leader, and it was actually someone who showed us the way or guided, but also to bring forth talents and gifts in people. And I think it's maybe too too much, too idealistic is it too idealistic to ask for a leader to inspire us, or do we only want them to manage things like the economy, health, because they have very limited powers in that way in terms of changing the society? So I think that's something that we can think about, have a bit of reflection on, which there hasn't been much of, I don't think.
So is that the difference, Talit, between a leader and a manager that Graham's just highlighted there, really?
Well, I think whether it's leadership or management, it's what you're managing and what values you bring to that. So I think it's quite right that we are looking for inspiration. We're looking to be led, perhaps enabling other people to do the leadership themselves. But I don't think that's what politics, certainly party politics, enables. It's very hierarchical. It's often behind a personality that we're told to elect, that we're told to vote for, and then we're told to get behind. But actually, I think that's created quite a lot of flaws in the system, because what we do is every 5 years we put in a vote at the ballot box, then we leave it to people. And rather than having the sense that it belongs to all of us and that we all have a leadership role in the politics of it. But I think when it comes to leadership, we spend a lot of time asking our politicians to both be leaders and work in partnership. And those two things often don't go hand in hand, because they're being pulled in one direction by their parties, pulled in another direction by what actually is required in society, widely by voters, by the public that they're trying to get on side. Those two things don't often merge together particularly well when the job is to hold on to the vote rather than progress the issue.
And maybe that's the challenge, isn't it? Because actually, on the face of it, only one of the members of that sort of the balance is held to account by the fact that they're not voted in again. Laura, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting conversation, but I think one thing that I found quite powerful about his speech and him stepping back is that we are all human, we're all flawed, we all make mistakes, we make wrong decisions. And he, very openly confronted that and said, what I did in this situation was not right. But I think a good leader is knowing that it's okay to make mistakes, but also knowing when it's time to step back, because that trust has been broken. So this wasn't just a mistake or a kind of wrong decision and it made a bit of a mess, but we moved on. Actually, this was a sort of broken relationship. And he recognised that and realised that as a leader, not just of his own party, but as the First Minister, he needs to be a unifying voice. And, we can talk about leadership in general, but even in this specific example, the Scottish Parliament is set up to be a collaborative space. It's meant to be designed that we have working together. And I think that is what a leader is someone who can bring together different voices to be able to work together collaboratively. And I think that's something that Humza recognised that he'd lost. And I think it was important that he stepped back because, a leader is not a leader if you don't have trust. And that was certainly something that I think came out of that. And when we look to leaders in all other spaces, it's about a relationship. A leader is not a figurehead. A leader is someone you should have a relationship with, someone that you can trust and work with.
It's funny, isn't it? Because if we look at leadership more broadly, taking it away, I feel as if actually, and we've all maybe agreed in some different way, that the First Minister role is quite unique, and I guess the politician role is quite unique when we talk about leadership. But more broadly, this idea of having to be a human being in this type of role, but what happens whenever your values detract a little bit or don't align with the values of the organisation that you're trying to lead? What happens? It's almost like you have to strip the self back and become that organisation to do it effectively.
Well, so I've been in a position where I've led organisations or campaigns, and they've all been linked to social justice and the progress of social justice. So in one sense, I've kind of been saved from that, because if I'm in that role, it's because I believe in those things and I care about those things. But I have been in positions where actually the compromise has been too far for what my belief system and my values system is, and that organisation's future. And I've actually had to step back and say this is now someone else's role, because I can't do this without having an existential crisis about my own value base and the purpose of the organisation. I think the idea that people have to choose their humanity and their existence and their value system or the organisation is often where organisations fail. It's often where we see the pursuit of profit over communities, we see profit margins over people, and it's where we actually, probably one of the reasons why we have poverty wages and a lack of taxation paid by the multinational companies across the world. But I've certainly been in that position where I've had to step back because it no longer aligned with my values.
Does that help maybe sometimes, Graham, when people are doing things that don't necessarily align with their values, but they can say in a leadership role, well, actually, it's, you know, it ain't me, gov. It's the organisation. They would do things they wouldn't maybe necessarily do if it was the individual self that's doing it. Kind of tapping into what Dalet's saying there about this idea of making decisions that are not necessarily, you know, right for the wider world or the wider community, or, you know. Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yes, I do, but I think also the way our political... Well, sorry, I've taken it back to politics, but I should say actually Baha'is I'm a member of the Baha'i faith, and Baha'is don't get involved in party politics.
For some people who are listening who don't know what the Baha'i faith is, what does it consist of? And we'll get back to this, just so that we've got a bit of context.
So the Baha'i faith is an independent world religion. It was founded in the 19th century in Iran. Baha'i comes from Baha'u'llah, which is Arabic for prophet of God, and we believe he was the latest but not the last in a line of messengers from God, manifestations of God, which includes Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna, Christ, and then there was someone before Baha'u'llah called the Bab who heralded Baha'u'llah, and it's an independent world religion, but we believe in essence all religions are one. And we believe in the three onenesses. So oneness of God, oneness of unfolding religion. So this is the religion for this age. And one humanity. And that one humanity is the thing, that ethos of peace and justice is something that's open to everyone, whether they accept the Baha'i faith.
Do you know, it's interesting, and thank you for explaining that for us. Whenever we talk about leadership and that in a setting of faith, Laura, how do you think that when we talk about values and I guess taking the self out of the equation again, like we were discussing there, how does that work when you're talking about faith leaders?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And I think as a Christian, I look to the Bible for wisdom on this. And in particular, there's a book in the Old Testament where we are taught about Daniel, who was a leader of his day. And part of his story was the fact that he moved from Jerusalem to Babylon, and there was big cultural changes as part of that. It was a different faith. They didn't practice the same religion. And I guess Daniel is an example of someone who was tested in a kind of context where the culture is completely different. And one of the things that Daniel had to do was decide as a leader, where did he draw the line in the sand when it came to adapting and changing and embracing new culture? But when that came up against his personal faith and his relationship with God. And I think that is something that I guess each individual might draw a line in a different place, whether that's to do with the culture or activities or organisational decisions. But I think that's something that we can look to and say, actually, God knows that we live in cultural contexts and that we need to work in the spaces that we're in. But actually, as has already been said, actually, you know, for many of us, we might get to the point where you say, actually, this organisational decision does not sit with me and my values. And so I think Daniel's a great character in the Bible to kind of look to for this idea of how to be a leader, particularly when the context and the culture is different to your beliefs. But also, you know, this is something that individuals, particularly people of faith, can pray about, you know, can not make that decision on their own, but actually ask God or, you know, whatever faith they're part of, you know, what am I supposed to do in this situation? Where do I draw my line in the sand?
Just wrapping this up, Dalit, this idea of how you balance. When we talk about, I guess, leadership, we also are talking about people who are given specific power. I guess the difficulty in that is deciding actually whenever it's time to relinquish that power and what that says about you. And I guess then as a leader, who you become because of that.
I think relinquishing power is one of the things that we have failed to get right across society, particularly in politics. I won't name the many people that I think should relinquish power by now, but it is about what we interpret as power. Yeah. So it's whether we see power as a kind of self-aggrandizing, ego-driven aspect, or a huge responsibility that we need to take seriously, and critically that needs to be redistributed to others. If it's not redistributed to others, I think it is, and if you don't come in with a mindset that you're looking to redistribute it to others, particularly those who are furthest away from it, then I question if you should be in the position at all.
Yeah, it's understanding, I guess. We talk about values, but also motives sometimes as well, and what's the energy behind it. Right, we are going to be, thank you very much, by the way, all of you, for that. You're sticking around until the end of the programme. We're going to be speaking about the Netflix show Baby Reindeer. I don't know if you've seen this, and I guess the different, really quite dark themes that sometimes it has brought up for people. We'll be discussing that in just a second, but also multiculturalism. So stick around for that. We've got some more music before we do that, though. Still with me this morning is Christian environmental campaigner Laura Young, Talit Yaqub, who's a social researcher and equalities campaigner, and journalist and writer Graham Burgess. Now, sticking with the political news this week, we were speaking about Humza Yousaf and his resignation as First Minister. He did choose to mention in his resignation speech multiculturalism, and I guess how that's changed on his announcement on Monday. Let's hear a little bit more from that speech.
As a young boy, born and raised in Scotland, I could never have dreamt that one day I would have the privilege of leading my country. People who looked like me were not in positions of political influence, let alone leading governments, when I was younger. But we now live in a UK that has a British Hindu Prime Minister, a Muslim Mayor of London, a Black Welsh First Minister, and for a little while longer, a Scots Asian First Minister of this country. So for those who decry that multiculturalism has failed across the UK, I would suggest that the evidence is quite to the contrary, and that is something we should all celebrate.
The former, or current still, First Minister, outgoing, Humza Yousaf, they're talking about multiculturalism. And it is something that the country often prides itself on here in Scotland. But how reflective are these wins that Humza Yousaf mentioned of Scottish society as a whole? And how valuable is input from right across the cultural spectrum? Talit, we spoke to you about this whenever Humza came into power. How much have things changed since he's been there? I mean, it's only been a year, but do you think that it has in any way?
Well, I think what really matters is representation, not just for representation's sake, but with a purpose. So I think there is something to be said about the visual, the image of people from different backgrounds, different diversities being in positions of power like that. I think there's an aspect of that representation that matters. What's even more important is, what do you do when you get to that position to extend the ladder to those who continue to be from marginalised communities? So what are you doing to tackle inequality? What are you doing to tackle the myths and misconceptions around multiculturalism and equality and inclusion? And I think, in 1 year trying to transform society is obviously not something that's going to be achievable, but he has talked very openly about the need for a more equal discussion, a fairer discussion around multiculturalism. He has been very supportive of and called out anti-immigration rhetoric that's on the increase. And indeed, we saw it just yesterday with the results of the London mayor election and actually the mayoral elections across England, that there was an attempt by a lot of kind of far-right anti-multiculturalism candidates to take positions. But actually, they got thumped in most of the elections, and Sadiq Khan particularly won a historic third term with even more of a increased majority than before. Which, for somebody like myself who cares,
he's been there. I mean, it's only been a year, but do you think that it has in any way?
Well, I think what really matters is representation, not just for representation's sake, but with a purpose. So, I think there is something to be said about the visual. The image of people from different backgrounds, different diversities being in positions of power like that. I think there's an aspect of that representation that matters. What's even more important is, what do you do when you get to that position to extend the ladder to those who continue to be from marginalised communities? So what are you doing to tackle inequality? What are you doing to tackle the myths and misconceptions around multiculturalism and equality and inclusion? And I think, in 1 year trying to transform society is obviously not something that's going to be achievable, but he has talked very openly about the need for a more equal discussion, a fairer discussion around multiculturalism. He has been very supportive of and called out anti-immigration rhetoric that's on the increase. And indeed, we saw it just yesterday with the results of the London mayor election and actually the mayoral elections across England, that there was an attempt by a lot of kind of far-right anti-multiculturalism candidates to take positions. But actually, they got thumped in most of the elections, and Sadiq Khan particularly won a historic third term with even more of a increased majority than before. Which, for somebody like myself who cares about multiculturalism and equality, those people getting a thumping was particularly delicious for me to watch online last night. But what matters here is seeing the individual for what they can provide in politics or in any kind of leadership role. One person doesn't represent an entire culture, an entire community. But there is no denying the fact that it creates a representation and an image. And actually, if you permit me, there's a wee story with that, which is that just a few weeks ago, my parents actually got a chance to meet Humza Yousaf for the first time in his role as First Minister. And credit to him, he my parents are not as mobile now with their age, and he came along and sat next to them. He spoke to them in Punjabi, and they had like a 5-minute conversation. And my dad, on the way back, commented that, you know, he arrived here in 1960 and experienced harrowing racism and poverty when he was here, and he didn't think that he commented he never thought he'd see that. He'd see somebody in that role. So as much as it's not representation for representation's sake, for particularly my dad and my mum's generation, to see that really mattered.
Why does that matter so much?
I think when you've experienced racism to the extent that my parents have, and indeed I have, and you've experienced that inequality, to see not just people who are Muslims or South Asians, but actually across Scotland and within a political party voting for those people to be in positions of power, seeing those people as equal to others that are on a ballot paper, that signals something about a changed environment, or at least the hope for a changed environment compared to those harrowing experiences we have had before. And I think more of that is good, but what matters even more is what do those people do when they get there to try and tackle those inequalities.
Graham, this idea, as Dalit was saying there, about the world that we live in now is increasingly polarised, and particularly with the rise of the right-wing parties, and I guess that's a rhetoric. How important, even more important, is multiculturalism now, given the sort of climate that we're living in?
It's incredibly important. I mean, I watched a wonderful interview with Humza Yousaf, I think from a few weeks or even a few months ago. Don't want to publicise another radio station, but with James O'Brien James O'Brien on LBC.
Outrageous.
It's out. I'm out the studio. I've been thrown out. Connie's thrown me out. But where he actually talked about his motivation for getting into politics was after the September 11th attacks and the run up to the Iraq War. His community in the south side of Glasgow felt very under attack. There was a huge rise in Islamophobia. And I think we should also say that although it's wonderful to have a First Minister who's Muslim, that doesn't mean that Islamophobia, there's been Islamophobia attacks, anti-Semitism, these things don't disappear, as Dalit was saying, because that person's there. But I think it's extraordinary that he actually... He talked about there being a division between the elders in the community who said, you know, we should like put our heads down, get on with our life, and this will all blow over. And younger people, including Humza Yousaf, said, no, we actually have to show the truth of what our faith is, that it's about peace, justice, and it is quite something. He's not even 40 also to have, even though it was for a short time. But I think it's really important that people of all religions, all communities, people from the poorest backgrounds, child poverty is still an enormous, the inequalities in our society. But I think showing that people of different communities can work together, and I think he will be an inspiration to people that if you choose politics or you choose something else, that whatever community you're from, you can rise to leadership positions.
Laura, what do you think? What more needs to be done so that we're seeing, I guess, the benefit of diversity, the benefit of understanding people who have had a different experience than we've had, or maybe the fact that everyone's had the same experience and it's about our view of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of it is about continuing to look around the room, whether that's in a political setting, at our leaders, your organisation, and asking the question, what voice is still not here, and how can we bring that voice in? You know, even thinking politically, we've had great representation from women, and now, of course, we've had Humza Yousaf representing a whole new community and background and diversity. But you know, there's a lot more we can do to bring in younger voices, to bring in different socioeconomic backgrounds. There's always more that we can be doing. And I think it's about how do we be as inclusive as possible. And I don't think it's just about representation so that people can see themselves in that person and think, you know, it is possible for someone who looks like me or thinks like me or comes from my background that could get to that position of power. But actually, I think it helps bring people in. Because if you see someone who is like you and represents you, you're more likely to engage. So, more likely to engage in politics. And, the younger voices that we get into politics, the more young people that might sign up to register to vote and, get engaged with this landscape. And so I think part of it is about how we create that inclusion so that we have active participants in everything that we're doing. But I think particularly, we need to also look at representation beyond just leadership roles. So everything that the Scottish Government does, as an example, they do with consultations. That's the chance for everybody, you, me, every single member of the public, to have our say in shaping this country. And we don't really do that good at it. It's not something that we do well. Often consultations are, kind of surface level. They don't really get as many people involved as possible. So we can be looking to even things like that. How can we do community engagement really well so that we are getting all these amazing, rich, diverse voices to help shape policies or organisations or community actions? And I think that's something that is also really important, is that getting leaders who are diverse is great, but it's also about continuing to push it on as far as possible to include all these different voices from communities, for people that aren't ever going to be in those leadership positions but still have a voice and still have something to say.
I think I completely agree with that, and it brings us to the conversation we had before. Leadership with power redistribution. So you don't get there and be the poster child for a particular community. There's a responsibility to do power redistribution, and we do. Consultations are terrible in Scotland. They're just here we'll ask you some questions about decisions that have probably already been made.
Yeah.
What is the outreach activity? How is power being redistributed, and how is it going through to particularly communities that are living in poverty? How do they have access to decision making? And I think that's the part of the diversity and inclusion that we don't talk about. It's not the image, it's the power and wealth redistribution that goes with that to those communities, and that's the kind of inclusion we need to talk about much more.
And even that idea of people even knowing that they have the ability to have a voice, right. Just that even that step before thinking, well, actually, so I can do this, which is really important as well. Sorry, Graham, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I think the idea of poverty, the figures for poverty are in Scotland are horrendous, and that's human beings. And actually, wealth distribution is one thing. Are people actually prepared to pay the wealthier, to pay more taxes? These are really, really difficult choices that appeal to the highest in us as people. And I think talking to people, listening to people that have got lived experience of issues of poverty, exclusion, is hugely important. It must go beyond sort of any type of tokenism, and it'd be really great to see consultation actually been handled in a much more effective way.
And it might be the case as well that it might be a while before we actually see the impact that, for example, we're talking about Humza Yousaf, that might actually have had. Yeah. Further down the line, we shall see. Okay, for the moment, thank you very much, the three of you. We're going to be delving into Baby Reindeer, and that sounds like a weird phrase that I've just spoken about, but it's trust me, if you've not seen it, we're going to sort of look into some of the quite dark themes that come up in that Netflix show shortly. But and if you are one of the lucky ones heading to see Nile Rodgers and Chic at the Edinburgh Playhouse in June, lucky you. You might know already he was the producing and writing brains behind this one. It's Diana Ross and Upside Down.
I said upside down, you're turning me, you're giving love instinctively. Round and round, you're turning me upside down. Boy, you turn me inside out and round upside down. Boy, you turn me inside out and round. Instinctively, you give to me the love that I need. I cherish the moments with you. Respectfully, I say to thee, I'm aware that you're cheating when no one makes me feel like you do. Upside down, boy, you turn me inside out and round upside down. Boy,
Respectfully, I say to thee, I'm aware that you're cheating, but no one makes me feel like you do. Upside down, boy, you turn me inside out and round, round, upside down. Boy, you turn me inside out and round, upside down. Boy, you turn me inside out and round, upside down. Boy, you turn me inside out and round, upside down. You turn me, you're giving love instinctively. Round and round, you're turning me. I say to thee respectfully, upside down, you're turning me. You're giving love instinctively. Around and around, you're turning me. I say to thee respectfully, I said upside down, you're turning me. You're giving love instinctively. Around and around, you're turning me. I say to thee respectfully, upside down, you're turning me. You're giving love instinctively. Round and round, you're turning me. I say to thee respectfully, upside down, you're turning me.
Upside Down, Diana Ross on BBC Radio Scotland. It's just coming up to 9:45. I'm with you until 10, and then it's the Sunday show after that with Martin Geisler and Fiona Stalker. Now, over the last few weeks, audiences across the globe have been captivated by Baby Reindeer, the Netflix drama inspired by Scottish comedian Richard Gadd's experiences of stalking and sexual assault. It originated as a fringe play that had a run down in London, but this TV series has topped the streaming services charts in the UK and US, and its success has resulted in a flurry of so-called armchair detectives jumping into action to try and track down the real stalker behind the story. Now a woman, they claim is threatening to sue Netflix. Lots of digging to this. Laura Young, Talat Yakub and Graham Burgess still with me. Laura, if you can, give us a little bit of a kind of brief overview of it, maybe for people that are listening that have not seen the programme.
Yeah, I mean, wow, it's a big programme. I think it's 7 or 8 episodes, 45 minutes to an hour each. So it's a kind of big programme to watch. And it's a true story about Richard, who is a comedian from Scotland. And part of the story is about him trying to make it big in London, trying to get his comedy off the ground. And there's 2 bits to the story. One is about him navigating that industry and some of the real toxic cultures. And you've already mentioned kind of sexual assault that happened to him when he was just trying to navigate the world of breaking into comedy. And so part of it is about that and about alcohol and drugs and pressure and people who are around him. But then the other bit is about just his regular life as he's doing this, working in a bar. And this woman one day comes in, her name's Martha in the programme, and she kind of is a bit upset, and he offers her a cup of tea. And then what basically happens is for the next few years, several years, he gets stalked by this woman, and it's his journey kind of coming to realising that this is someone who is not well, who is stalking him, and it really just shows what that was like for him. The thousands of emails and phone calls and following around, she shows up every day to his work, and it really sort of investigates it. And I think for me, one of my big takeaways is it's a very raw, very open programme. He plays himself, so he kind of relived a lot of this trauma.
Well,
and
yeah. That's an interesting part of it as well, that I think a lot of people that I know who have seen it were like, oh, I didn't realise that was actually the person in the story. Let's have a little listen to this, right? Because Richard Gadd's real life stalker, or the person who's portrayed in the film, the name that they use was Martha. She probably isn't the usual image. I don't know what the usual image of a stalker would be, but that's what a lot of people are saying about it. It's not necessarily what you might expect. And Richard has been speaking to Nicola Meehan on the afternoon show, and this is what he had to say.
I wanted to paint the reality of the situation. I remember when I was getting stalked, I did have these thoughts. Well, this is nothing like it is on TV. This is nothing like it is in film. Where you meet someone, they're kind of very normal, usually very attractive, and then they become weirder and weirder, more sinister and more sinister. I saw, it was almost two vulnerable people colliding at once and sort of fall out of that. And that's what I wanted to portray. I mean, stalking is a mental illness. It is a condition, a sort of a fantasy addiction of some kind. And I wanted to portray the realities. I felt the world kind of needed to know them in a way.
So that was Richard Gads, who is the main character in the film. I say character, it is a real life story that he's portraying. Talit, when you think about this story more widely, I think a lot of people, like I was saying earlier on, were surprised in the respect that it's the woman who takes centre stage in the sort of stalking role, which I think has added maybe to people's fascination about this.
I think it's a harrowing watch, and I think it's necessarily harrowing. It's not been sanitised for a Netflix consumption. It's a very raw tale, and I found it quite difficult to watch. I watched a little bit of it and I stopped and came back to it later because it's very intense. But I think what it really illustrates, and the response to it really illustrates, is something that particularly organisations that are supporting survivors of sexual violence often talk about, is that we still live in a society where we want to put a perpetrator in a particular box and a victim in a particular box. We want a victim to be fully worthy of being supported, rather than seeing that their behaviours might have not been what we would expect a victim to do, but it's complex. There's trauma involved, and I think what was depicted very well in this is how trauma falls out and what impact that has on the individual, and what could look like risky behaviours that people question are a trauma response to a lot of that. And in the same way, we want the perpetrator to be fully like the baddie in a character, where what Richard Gadd was trying to do was show that this is somebody who was vulnerable. He talked about two people who were vulnerable kind of crashing into each other in that recording that you just played. And I think that's quite nuanced for that particular story. And I think the response to it has been, like you've said, the armchair detectives who want to find out who this person is and create a little bit of their own justice, when that's not really what the show was about. The show was about the nuance that goes on around this and the depiction of those characters. I think it was incredibly well done, although what I would say is I think what it gives us is a little bit of a caveat about how we portray true stories, and that there probably needs to be more effort put in to bring it into to the here and now, where everybody wants to go onto social media to try and find out who's involved, that there's probably more care that needs to be done with it.
It's interesting, the idea of putting perpetrators inside boxes and who we expect them to be and what we expect them to look like and sound like and all the rest of it, which in itself maybe was why at certain points Richard found it difficult to actually sort of say, wait a minute, this is not right, or go to the police. It took him a really long time, Graham, to actually say there's something not right here. We see the sort of, I'm not a fan of that phrase, toxic masculinity, but it is, I guess, what we've seen in the pub when all his mates were, sort of, having a laugh and a joke about Martha, and he's sort of like, well, this is actually pretty serious.
Well, yeah. Although at one stage, actually, the acting's incredible. It must have been very traumatic. Actors sometimes talk about how when they're acting and their body's going through something. When they're acting, their body doesn't know that this is just pretend, but actually he was reenacting things that had happened to him.
And traumatic things.
Very traumatic. I mean, I don't know how much detail we should go into, and there might be a sort of trigger warning that there's male rape. There's the whole dynamic around the father and son. I was crying this morning watching the end of the programme. It's extraordinarily honest, but it's very, very well written. So there's really memorable lines, which I'm struggling to remember too many of them. But he talked about Pilsner misogynists, which I thought was, and there is one scene where they're just been incredibly brutal about the woman, and she so wants to have someone that idealises this person who actually starts with kindness. Maybe the biggest miracle in the film is that she gets offered a cup of tea for free in a London pub, which has certainly never happened to me. But that actually what I think is really important to get across is there's a self-loathing. There's a deep, deep, deep self-loathing with him within her. There is no black and white, but he actually says that she sees him the way he would like to be seen. It's that reflection of how he would like to be that I think seduce isn't the right word, but means that he doesn't actually see it as abuse. Part of him wants to be
to keep it going in some
love.
way.
Exactly, yeah. And so there's a lack in him, and then we find out what that comes from, or at least partly what that comes from. But I have to. What is incredibly harrowing, and I think also the fact that men, I've heard anecdotally quite a lot of men saying they stopped watching it after episode 1 or 2. Maybe that tells us something about how we're not used to seeing men as victims of abuse, of sexual abuse, and what that tells us about us as a society. So maybe that, although it is harrowing, that was a very necessary thing he's done to let us talk about that and think about that.
And the main thing that came from that, I think, Graham, is the shame that he felt that was attached to it.
Which is an extraordinarily destructive emotion, and it all becomes internalised. And the cycle, there's, I don't want to, there's certainly...
I know it's hard to talk about this because it's giving too much away, isn't it?
But the thing about trauma is it feeds onto other trauma, and it manifests itself in ways that you can't see at the time. And there's a lot of cruelty to other human beings that comes from... terrible traumatic things that have been inflicted on people. So I think there is a kindness that he was trying to instill, when it's unfortunate that people have gone in this kind of vigilante of trying to unmask the person.
Yeah, and I want to get into that, but I think part of that as well is the complexity around identifying who you are when at the best of times, but when something traumatic like that has happened to you, and not really knowing what part of the self is the true you, and then the complexities that he showed with his relationship with his trans girlfriend as well. That comes up in it too. Laura, for you, when we talk about this idea of the armchair detectives, and I guess what that tells us about it's about this similar, I guess, the rise in true crime and why people are so obsessed with watching these things and understanding, because they feel so detached and different from I guess innately who we are. So sometimes people find that fascinating.
Yeah, I guess my kind of initial feeling about this is we've kind of missed the point of the programme, which is actually what a lot of people are now doing is, you know, really trying to find as much information as possible on these people that are featured in the programme, and they are chasing after them. There's a bit of sort of online harassment happening. You know, you can go on and see that people are exposing who they think are the characters in real life. And I think part of it is, Richard Gadd said, you've kind of missed the point of this, because actually that is doing this action that is what happened to him. You know, he had this person chasing after him, stalking him and causing, you know, a lot of harm. And, you know, particularly a lot of that was online as well. And yet that's what we're all sitting doing now. You know, we're saying we want to almost go after these people and try and, you know, seek justice. And it's almost like we've fallen into this trap. And I think it's just really unfortunate because, you know, I think it's fun. You know, it's fun to do internet sleuthing. It's fun to find out things and be that detective. But actually, are we understanding that there's harm behind that? And I think Richard has come out a few times now and said, you know, please, you know, we're trying to keep this all anonymous. We don't want people, you know, being hurt and harmed. This was about his story.
Which in a way is hard to do, because in actual fact, you're telling your story. You know, you're making the decision to put it out onto one of the biggest streaming platforms in the world. So inevitably that is part of the collateral damage to this. So at some point, Dalit, he's got to then make a decision to say, actually, me telling this story is more important than the risk of what potential harm this could do, because he would have known in some way that was a potential to happen, as much as he, I guess, would have hoped it didn't.
I think there's elements that there is a responsibility about how you cover the identities. There's some questions now about whether a good enough job was done to be able to kind of cover the identity of Martha within it. What I think is really interesting is I think there needs to be more reflection about how you do true crime or true stories in an age of social media and accessibility to everybody. And so, you know, it was quite right that the show had trigger warnings. It's quite right. It actually had signposting to support services. If you've been affected by it, maybe it needs to have a warning to say, this is not the point of the show for you to go and figure these people out. Because the nuance of the show, quite rightly, that's been pointed out, there's two things in particular that were done very well in the show that haven't been given the spotlight that I wish they had. One was the trauma response to sexual assault and sexual violence. He talks about the fact that he just froze. That's not a response that's in society we understand well or appreciate the reality of. People often ask, why did you not fight back? Why did you not do more? That's not necessarily the response that anybody would have. That's not respected, understood or empathised with enough, and he showed that really well. The second was the bumbling police officer that asked him repeatedly, it's been 6 months, why haven't you reported it yet? Well, the shame. And the guilt, the trauma, the fear that comes up from being the person that reports this, I think that was depicted really quite well. And those are the conversations that I wish we were having more of as a consequence of this show.
Listen, thank you, all three of you, this morning. We've had Talit Yakub there, Laurie Young and Graham Burgess. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing the morning with me today. It's been interesting and lots of fun. That is it from me for this week. Kathleen McDonald will be back next Sunday. She's going to be chatting to a very special This Spiritual Live guest to reflect on the role faith has played in their life. And 3 more panellists will deep dive into some of the big stories of the week as well. Sunday show's up next. Taking you there this morning, though, is Aerosmith. Have a good day. See you soon.
I could stay awake just to hear you breathing, watch you smile while you are sleeping, while you're far away and dreaming. I could spend my life in this sweet surrender. I could stay lost in this moment.